Recently, a 66-year-old billionaire financier, a man who counted presidents and princes among his closest friends, was found dead in a cold Manhattan jail cell. You are about to hear a testimony from the apex of human arrogance. When the feds finally locked him in a concrete box, he thought he could cheat justice one last time. Stay with us. He died believing he owned the world. He awoke in a realm where his black book couldn't buy off the judge. Listen.
I was not just a man. I was a sovereign nation contained within a tailored suit. I didn't just have wealth. I had gravity. Presidents, prime ministers, crown royals, and the greatest scientific minds of a generation orbited around me, desperate for my funding, my connections, and most importantly, my secrets. If you want to understand how a man becomes a monster, you must understand the absolute absence of consequences. When you have billions of dollars, the law is not a wall. It is merely a toll booth. You pay the fee and you keep driving. I owned a massive townhouse in Manhattan. I owned a ranch in New Mexico. I owned a private Boeing 727 that the press gave a dark, fitting nickname. But my crown jewel was the island. It was a private paradise in the Caribbean, a fortress of saltwater and palm trees where I was the undisputed god. I built strange temples on the cliffs. I installed military-grade security cameras in every bedroom, every hallway, every bathroom. I didn't just traffic human beings for my own depraved appetites. I weaponized them. I collected the darkest secrets of the most powerful men in the world on hard drives. I owned their reputations, therefore I owned them. For 20 years, I operated in the absolute open. I lived with a level of impunity that would make a Roman emperor blush. I believed that morality was a construct invented by the poor to keep themselves docile. I was the elite. I was the apex predator. I consumed what I wanted, who I wanted, when I wanted, and I simply threw the broken pieces away. But empires fall, and the universe has a terrifying way of balancing the scales. The illusion of my divinity shattered on a humid tarmac in New Jersey. I stepped off my private jet, expecting my usual black car service. Instead, I was met by the FBI. They didn't care about my bank accounts. They didn't care about the names in my black book. They put cold steel handcuffs on my wrists. For the first time in 40 years, a man told me what to do, and my money couldn't silence him. The descent was brutally fast. My Manhattan mansion was raided. My hard drives were seized. The media empire that used to praise my philanthropy was now broadcasting my mugshot 24 hours a day. The judges I thought I owned suddenly denied my bail. They took my tailored suits. They gave me a rough, humiliating orange jumpsuit. They stripped me of my dignity and locked me in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. The cell was a 9x8 concrete box. It smelled of bleach, old sweat, and human despair. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a maddening, relentless frequency. There was no mahogany desk. There was no ocean breeze. There was just a metal toilet, a thin mattress, and the terrifying, deafening silence of a man who suddenly realizes he has run out of moves. I paced the concrete floor like a caged leopard. The panic was a physical acid burning in my chest. The trial was coming. The federal prosecutors were going to open my entire life to the public. The names, the flights, the girls, the island. They were going to strip me naked in front of the entire world and lock me in a cage until my body rotted. I, the man who controlled empires, was going to die a number in a federal penitentiary. My arrogance, even in that concrete box, remained absolute. I decided I would not give them the satisfaction. I would not sit in a courtroom and let peasants judge me. I had always been the master of my own destiny. I would be the master of my own exit. I viewed suicide not as a defeat, but as the ultimate executive decision. I was firing the universe. I was opting out. I waited until the guards did their midnight rounds. My hands were shaking, not from fear of God, but from the adrenaline of my final escape. I took the thin, orange prison bedsheet. I tore it, twisting it into a tight, brutal rope. I tied one end to the steel grate of the top bunk. I tied the other end tightly around my neck. I knelt on the cold concrete floor. I didn't pray. A god doesn't pray. I leaned forward, letting my own body weight do the work. The physical reality of strangulation is not peaceful. It is a violent, biological panic. The blood vessels in my eyes burst instantly. My lungs screamed for oxygen. My hands instinctively flew up to claw at the sheet, to loosen the knot. But the weight of my body was too heavy. My vision tunneled into a dark, pulsing red. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights faded into a deafening, high-pitched ringing. Just a few more seconds. My dying brain whispered, just a few more seconds and it's over. Oblivion. Silence. The ultimate escape. My heart seized. My brain flatlined. The life left my physical body on the floor of that Manhattan cell. But I did not find oblivion. The transition was instantaneous. I did not drift into a peaceful sleep. I fell. I fell through a terrifying, lightless void, accelerating at a speed that felt like it was tearing my consciousness into atoms. The cold air of the prison cell was replaced by a suffocating, oppressive heat that smelled of copper, sulfur, and stagnant, dead water. I slammed into the ground. It wasn't concrete. It felt like wet, shifting sand. I gasped, sucking in air that burned my lungs like inhaled acid. I opened my eyes, expecting to see nothing. Instead, I saw a sky the color of dried blood. I was kneeling on a desolate, jagged beach. Black, oily waves crashed against rusted metal cliffs in the distance. I slowly stood up. I was no longer wearing the orange prison jumpsuit. I was completely naked, completely vulnerable. I looked down the shoreline. The beach wasn't made of sand. It was made of millions of crushed, broken bones. A voice echoed from the dark water, a voice that sounded like 1,000 weeping children layered over the deep, guttural growl of a predator. "Welcome to the island, financier," the voice hissed, vibrating through the marrow of my bones. "Your flight has arrived." I had not escaped the prison. I had merely unlocked the door to the execution chamber. I scrambled backward, my bare hands sinking deep into the pulverized, jagged fragments of human bone that formed the shoreline of this cursed place. The shards sliced my palms and knees, but the physical pain was secondary to the absolute, world-shattering shock paralyzing my mind. I was a man who had orchestrated the lives of presidents and royalty. I had moved billions of dollars with a single phone call. I had lived in a reality where the word no simply did not exist. But as I knelt naked on that beach of shattered skeletons, I reached for a phone that didn't exist, in a tailored suit I no longer wore, to call a lawyer who could not hear me. My wealth, my leverage, my black book full of devastating secrets, they were all utterly, terrifyingly useless. For the first time in my entire existence, I was completely bankrupt. I possessed absolutely nothing, not even the rights to my own body. I looked out at the ocean. It was not the crystal-clear turquoise water of the Caribbean that I used to sail my luxury yachts across. It was a churning, viscous expanse of black, oily pitch. It didn't crash against the shore with a soothing rhythm. It slammed against the bone beach with a heavy, sickening thud, releasing the suffocating stench of rotting meat, sulfur, and ancient, coagulated blood. I looked up. There was no sun. The sky was a bruised, pulsating canopy of dark red, radiating an oppressive, suffocating heat that immediately began to blister my bare shoulders. I forced myself to stand, my feet bleeding with every step. I looked toward the center of the island, up towards the cliffs. In the living world, I had built a bizarre, blue and gold striped temple on the highest point of my private estate. I used it as a monument to my own ego, a place where I conducted the darkest of my transactions. Here the temple existed, but it was a monstrous, demonic reflection of my arrogance. It was a colossal, towering cathedral of rusted, jagged iron and black obsidian. Thick, dark smoke poured from its spires, and a low, mechanical hum vibrated through the ground beneath my feet, shaking the marrow in my bones. Suddenly, a sound pierced the heavy, suffocating air. It wasn't a siren. It was the sharp, terrifying blast of a hunting horn, but it sounded as if it were being blown through a hollowed-out human spine. The sound echoed off the black ocean and rattled through the twisted dead trees that bordered the beach. In my life, I was the ultimate hunter. I hunted innocence, I hunted leverage, I hunted the vulnerable from the safety of my private jets and secure compounds. But the blast of that horn triggered a biological terror I had never experienced. The predator had instantly become the prey. Out from the tree line of petrified black wood emerged the hounds of hell. But they were not animals. They were grotesque, corrupted amalgamations of the very elite class I had belonged to. They were massive, bloated, faceless entities walking on all fours. Their skin was a thick, charred leather, and they wore the scorched, melting remnants of expensive tuxedos and silk ties. Heavy gold watches and platinum cufflinks were fused directly into their burning flesh. Their jaws unhinged, revealing rows of jagged, broken glass instead of teeth. They were the physical embodiment of unbridled, gluttonous consumption, and they were looking directly at me. A second horn blast shattered the air, and the beasts charged. I ran. The billionaire, who hadn't run a mile in 30 years, who was used to being chauffeured from private helipads to luxury penthouses, was now sprinting for his eternal life. I plunged into the jungle, but it wasn't made of palm trees and tropical flowers. The vegetation consisted of towering, petrified ironwood and thick vines of rusted razor wire. I crashed through the underbrush, desperately trying to put distance between myself and the roaring beasts behind me. Every step was a fresh agony. The razor vines whipped across my face, slicing my cheeks open. Thorns the size of hunting knives tore through the flesh of my thighs and calves. I bled a thick, dark substance that did not bring the sweet release of death, but only heightened the sensitivity of my nerve endings. The pain was blinding, white-hot and absolute. I could hear the heavy, thudding footsteps of the beasts closing in. I could smell the ozone and the horrific stench of their breath, a smell like burning money and decaying flesh. As I tore through the jagged ironwood, my lungs burning like furnaces, a profound, devastating psychological torture settled over me. I was feeling the exact paralyzing terror of the victims I had flown to my island. I finally understood the absolute, inescapable nightmare of being trapped, hunted, and entirely at the mercy of a cruel, unstoppable force in a place where no one was coming to the rescue. I was drinking from the very cup of terror I had forced so many others to drink from. I had built a kingdom on the exploitation of the powerless, and now I was the most powerless entity in the universe. My foot caught on a thick, rusted root, hidden beneath the ash-covered dirt. I fell forward, shattering my jaw against the petrified earth. The impact sent a shockwave of agony through my skull. I tasted bone splinters and blood. Before I could even attempt to push my broken body off the ground, a massive burning claw slammed into the center of my back, pinning me to the dirt with the weight of a freight train. The beast stood over me, its molten gold cufflinks searing into my shoulder blades. It didn't bite my neck to kill me. In hell, death is a luxury you cannot afford. Instead, it opened its glass-filled jaw and let out a deafening, mocking roar that sounded like the laughter of 1,000 corrupt politicians. A thick, rusted chain whipped through the air and wrapped tightly around my bleeding ankles. I wasn't going to be eaten in the jungle. I was the prize. I was the commodity. The beast turned and began to drag me back through the razor-wire jungle, pulling me relentlessly up the jagged, rocky incline toward the towering iron temple on the cliff. I screamed as my chest, my stomach, and my face were dragged across the broken glass, rusted metal, and petrified thorns. Every jagged rock tore strips of flesh from my body, exposing the spiritual muscle underneath, yet I remained perfectly, agonizingly conscious of every single millimeter of the journey. I, the untouchable elite, was being hauled like a slaughtered pig to the slaughterhouse. The massive, groaning iron doors of the dark temple slowly began to open, radiating a heat so intense it instantly blistered the remaining skin on my face. I had arrived at my new estate, and the landlord was waiting. The beast dragged my bleeding, shattered body across the threshold of the colossal iron temple. The temperature inside was catastrophic. It was not the ambient heat of a humid Caribbean afternoon. It was the suffocating, skin-melting blast of an industrial crematorium. The floor beneath me was not made of polished marble, but of glowing, white-hot iron grates suspended over a lake of boiling pitch. Every time my bare, shredded skin made contact with the grid, the fat and muscle hissed, sending up plumes of sickening, sweet-smelling smoke. I was hauled into the center of a massive, cavernous amphitheater. The architecture was a grotesque parody of a courtroom and a high society auction house. The walls were lined with thousands of rusted iron cages suspended by thick burning chains. Inside these cages were the guests of this infernal VIP room. I recognized some of the faces. There were corrupt politicians, disgraced monarchs, billionaire media moguls, and pharmaceutical titans who had died decades before me. On Earth, these men had been untouchable. They had attended my galas. They had flown on my planes. They had consumed the innocence I provided them. Now they were nothing but screaming, mutilated cattle. Demonic entities with elongated limbs and hollow, glowing eyes moved between the cages, violently extracting glowing, parasitic worms from the chests of the damned. The worms represented their earthly secrets, their bribes, their hidden crimes. Every extraction caused the men to shriek in universe-shattering agony, only for the wounds to instantly heal, so the process could begin again. The beast finally released the chain around my ankles, leaving me to writhe on the searing iron grate. A booming tectonic voice rattled the massive iron pillars of the temple. "The facilitator has arrived." I forced my head up, my jaw still agonizingly fractured. Sitting atop a towering bench carved from fused human skulls was the magistrate. He was a colossal, terrifying entity. He wore the tattered, burning robes of a high court judge, but his face was a shifting liquid mass of black oil and weeping eyes. In his massive, clawed hand, he held a book. It wasn't the small, discreet, leather-bound black book I kept locked in my Manhattan safe. This book was massive, bound in thick, scarred human skin that was still actively bleeding. The pages were made of thin, hammered sheets of lead. "On Earth you believed you were a god of leverage," the magistrate hissed, his voice echoing with the sound of snapping bones and clinking coins. "You built an empire not just on flesh, but on blackmail. You collected the sins of the elite. You recorded their perversions. You believed that holding their secrets made you immortal." The magistrate stood, stepping down from the high bench. With every step, the temple shook. He walked toward me, the heat radiating from his oily robes blistering my remaining skin. He threw the massive bleeding ledger onto the glowing iron grate in front of my face. The impact sent a shockwave through my shattered teeth. "Open the ledger, financier," he commanded. Invisible, crushing forces grabbed my wrists. My arms were violently yanked forward, my fingers forced to grip the heavy, bleeding cover of the book. As I pulled it open, the lead pages didn't contain ink. They contained razor-sharp, jagged metallic letters that pulsed with a blinding radioactive green light. It was my black book. Every name, every flight log, every illegal transaction, every depraved act I had ever facilitated or participated in was permanently recorded in this demonic ledger. "In the realm of the living, secrets are a shield," the magistrate mocked, looming over my broken body. "In the realm of the damned, secrets are weight. You hid your crimes in the dark. Now they will be your eternal anchor." The magistrate raised his clawed hand. Instantly, the glowing green letters lifted off the lead pages. They swarmed into the air like a hive of radioactive hornets. I screamed as they dove directly into my chest, piercing my spiritual flesh and embedding themselves into my ribcage. The physical pain was incomprehensible. Each name, each secret, carried the exact emotional and physical trauma of the victims involved. As the letters buried themselves in my chest, a heavy, rusted iron chain materialized, erupting from my sternum. The chain plunged straight down, passing through the white-hot iron grate, and plunged into the boiling lake of pitch below. Another swarm of letters struck my stomach, forging another chain, then my arms, then my legs. Within seconds I was pierced by hundreds of thick burning chains, all anchored to the agonizing weight of my own blackmail ledger. "Hoist the facilitator!" the magistrate roared. The mechanisms of the temple groaned. The chains pulled taut. I was violently yanked off the iron grate. I was hoisted high into the suffocating, scorching air of the amphitheater, suspended by the very secrets I had used to manipulate the world. My arms and legs were spread-eagled, my body stretched to the absolute tearing point. I looked down at the magistrate and the lake of fire below. I looked at the thousands of screaming elite men in their cages along the walls. Then, the true psychological torture began. In life, I was obsessed with control. I meticulously managed every detail of my island, my properties, and my image. I controlled who saw what and who knew what. I was the master of the closed door. But hanging from the ceiling of hell, my mind was violently pried open. The massive, smoking spires of the Iron Temple acted as a broadcast antenna. Suddenly, every single horrific, depraved, and humiliating memory I possessed was forcefully projected onto the walls of the cathedral in blinding, high-definition fire. Every twisted act I committed behind the locked doors of my mansion, every moment of manipulation, every terrified plea of the vulnerable people I had trafficked, it was all broadcasted for the entire demonic congregation to see. I, the man who lived in absolute, untouchable secrecy, was now entirely exposed. The demons below erupted into deafening, mocking laughter. The disgraced politicians and billionaires in their cages pointed and shrieked with sadistic joy, watching the man who had blackmailed them be utterly destroyed by his own hubris. I writhed against the burning chains, tearing my own flesh in a desperate, pathetic attempt to escape the humiliation. I closed my eyes, but the visions burned directly onto the inside of my eyelids. I screamed until my vocal cords ruptured, spitting blood down into the boiling pitch. "There are no NDAs in hell, financier," the magistrate bellowed, his voice cutting through my agony. "There are no private settlements. You bought silence on earth, but here your sins will scream for eternity." The chains tightened further, slowly dislocating my shoulders with a sickening pop. I was completely paralyzed, completely exposed, burning alive in a cathedral built from my own arrogance. I was no longer a billionaire. I was an eternal exhibit of humiliation. I hung suspended from the blistering iron ceiling of the demonic amphitheater, my limbs dislocated, my spiritual flesh pierced by the burning chains of my own blackmail ledger. The demonic magistrate sat upon his throne of skulls, watching me writhe in a torment that money could never, ever bribe away. But the physical agony of hell was only half of the execution. The devil demands total psychological annihilation. High above the magistrate's throne, the suffocating blood-red clouds parted like a rotting curtain. A massive, crystalline projection screen materialized, hovering over the boiling lake of pitch. "Look upon your great escape, financier," the magistrate's voice boomed, rattling my shattered teeth. "Look at the masterpiece of your arrogance." The screen snapped into focus, showing the interior of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. It was 6:30 in the morning, Earth time. A tired, underpaid prison guard was walking the rounds of the special housing unit. He carried a clipboard and a ring of heavy brass keys. He stopped at my cell. He looked through the reinforced glass window. He froze. Hey, we need a medic in here! SU, cell 112, open the door, he screamed into his radio. The heavy steel door slammed open. The guards rushed in. I watched from the depths of hell as they scrambled to cut down my body. It was not the dignified, powerful exit of a master manipulator. It was the most pathetic, humiliating sight imaginable. My face was swollen and dark purple. My eyes were bloodshot and bulging. The orange prison jumpsuit was soaked in cold sweat. They laid my lifeless, bloated corpse on the concrete floor and began furiously pumping my chest, breaking my ribs in a desperate attempt to resuscitate a man who was already burning in the abyss. I didn't look like a billionaire. I didn't look like a kingmaker. I looked like a piece of discarded, rotting meat on a filthy prison floor. Within hours, the news broke. The crystalline screen in hell fractured into 1,000 smaller monitors, simultaneously broadcasting every major news network on Earth. Breaking news: disgraced billionaire found dead in cell. I watched the immediate nuclear fallout of my escape. I thought dying would seal my secrets forever. I thought without my testimony, the investigations would die. I was a fool. My death didn't bury the truth, it excavated it. Without my money and my lawyers actively threatening people, the dam broke entirely. I watched FBI tactical teams raid my massive townhouse in New York. They cracked open the biometric safes I thought were impenetrable. They hauled out the hard drives, the photographs, the flight logs. They raided the island. Federal agents marched across the very beaches where I had played God, digging up the servers I had buried beneath the Iron Temple. Then the true horror of my impotence set in. I watched the men I had protected, the politicians, the princes, the tech moguls, scramble like terrified rats. Their PR teams worked overtime. I saw a beloved royal prince sweating profusely on national television, stammering, lying through his teeth, claiming he barely knew me, that he had never stepped foot in my house. I saw former presidents quietly scrubbing photos of us from their archives. The men who used to drink my vintage champagne and beg for my investments were now treating my name like the bubonic plague. I was entirely abandoned. And then, the final crushing blow: the women. The girls I had trafficked, silenced, and paid off. Without me alive to terrorize them, they stepped up to the microphones. They walked into federal courtrooms. They sat on national television and told the world exactly what I was. They described the rooms. They described the island. They laid bare the absolute monstrous depravity of my private life. I screamed against the burning chains in hell, tearing my own torn muscles. Shut them up! Call the fixers! Sue them into the ground! But I had no voice. I had no fixers. I had no power. I was forced to hang in the blistering heat of the demonic cathedral, entirely paralyzed, watching my empire be dismantled brick by brick, my wealth seized, my reputation turned into the ultimate global symbol for elite evil. My legacy wasn't wealth. My legacy was a permanent stain on human history. The crystalline screen faded to black. The magistrate stood up, his liquid, oily face contorting into a sickening smile. "The estate has been liquidated," he whispered, the sound cutting through the wails of the damned. "Now, you pay the eternal interest." The chains anchored in my chest violently pulled downward, dragging me closer to the boiling black pitch below. I am speaking directly to the man watching this right now. You are not a billionaire. You do not own a private island. You do not fly on a private jet with royalty. But you have your own black book, don't you? You have your own locked folders. You have the secret apps on your phone. You have the hidden bank statements, the burner emails, the quiet, dark corners of your life where you think you are the undisputed god of your own private island. You think because you delete the texts, because you clear the browser, because you pay for the hotel in cash, that your secrets are sealed. You are playing a rigged game against an opponent who never sleeps. Listen to a man who bought the world and lost his soul. Money cannot bribe the magistrate of eternity. Status cannot unlock the chains of your own hypocrisy. You think death is an escape route. You think taking your own life or dying before you are caught will protect your family from your shame. Death is not a loophole. It is a trapdoor. And the fall is terrifying. Do not wait for the FBI to raid your hard drives. Do not wait for your wife to find the second phone in your golf bag. Do not wait for the heart attack in the hotel room. The truth does not stay buried. It always demands a resurrection. 1. Burn the black book. Whatever your secret is, destroy the access to it today. Smash the burner phone. Delete the accounts. Cancel the secret credit card. Do not manage your sin. Execute it. 2. Stop believing the illusion of control. You are not a mastermind. You are a hostage. The devil is simply letting you hold the leash until he is ready to pull it. Drop the leash. 3. Confess to the living. The humiliation of confessing your double life to your wife, your pastor, or your accountability partner on earth is agonizing. But it is a temporary pain that leads to redemption. The humiliation of being exposed in the arena of the damned is an eternal fire that never goes out. Choose the pain that heals. If this testimony ripped the mask off your secret life, subscribe to this channel right now. The world will tell you to protect your image at all costs. We are telling you that your image is the very thing dragging you to hell. We are building a brotherhood of men who refuse to live on the island of the damned. We choose the brutal, bloody light of truth over the comfortable, deadly shadows of leverage. Join us. Confess. I am the untouchable elite who died in a concrete box. I bought the world, and it cost me everything. The magistrate is waiting.